Hi, so this is lesson 8.4, division of fractions. The objectives today, to be able to find the reciprocal of a number, to be able to divide integers and fractions by a fraction, and to be able to use strategies for dividing fractions. Our prior knowledge then, to be able to complete this lesson, we should be able to simplify fractions. So for example, if I have 8 out of 20, to simplify it, we need to divide the top and the bottom by the same number. Both 8 and 20 are divisible by 4, so if we divide them by 4, we end up with 2 out of 5, and we can't simplify 2 out of 5 because they have no numbers in common. We should be able to change improper fractions to mixed numbers, so to do that we look at the denominator. We see how many times the denominator fits into the numerator. So 4 goes into 15 3 whole times, 4, 8, 12. From 12 to 15 leaves us with 3 remainder. The remainder becomes the new numerator, and the denominator is the original denominator from our question. So 15 out of 4 becomes 3 3/4. Should also be able to multiply two fractions together and a fraction and an integer together. So remember, when multiplying fractions, we multiply numerators together and we multiply denominators together. We don't need common denominators for multiplication. So 8 times 2 is 16, 20 times 5 is 100, and then we can simplify our fraction. So both 16 and 100 can be divided by 4. If we divide them by 4, we get 4 out of 25. If I have an integer and a fraction, first thing I need to do is turn my integer into a fraction by dividing it by 1, so 4 over 1. Then we can multiply our numerators, so 4 times 2 is 8. Our denominators, 1 times 3 is 3, and again change it from an improper fraction to a mixed number. 3 fits into 8 twice, 2 3s are 6, and we need 8, so that gives me 2 remainder, which go back over my denominator of 3. Make sure you're happy with those before you move on. If not, please stop this video and go back to the previous lessons. Things you'll need for this lesson then, you need a maths book or some paper to write on, and a pen or a pencil to write with. Okay, so first we're going to have a look at reciprocals. If you're not familiar with the word reciprocal, it means the inverse, the opposite. So in the case of a fraction, it's the upside down fraction. When a number is multiplied by its reciprocal, it always equals 1. So let's have a look at those. So if I want the reciprocal of 2 out of 3, we simply turn the fraction upside down and we get 3 out of 2. So you can see it's flipped itself over the other way. And if I were to multiply these together, 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 2 is 6, I would get 6 over 6, which is 1. So if you want to check you've done your reciprocal correctly, multiply your numerators and your denominators. If they both come to the same number, then you've done that correctly. Our second example then, I've got 1 out of 9. So it's reciprocal. Remember, we're going to flip it upside down. We get 9 over 1. Now that's an improper fraction. So we're going to simplify this because 9 divided by 1 is equal to 9. Okay, so for our where we have 1 divided by 1, if we divide by 1, we get a whole number. So the reciprocal of 1/9 is 9. Our last one then, we've got a single integer. Well, we want its reciprocal. So remember, if we want an integer to be a fraction, we divide it by 1. So the number 5 can also be written as 5 over 1. And then we can find its reciprocal by flipping it upside down. So it becomes 1 over 5. So the reciprocal of any whole number is 1 over that whole number. We use this skill a lot in other areas of math, so it is worth making sure you can find these reciprocals. Okay, so now it's your turn. Pause the video, see if you can write down the reciprocals for each of these numbers. Okay, so our first one then, so 2 out of 7 becomes 7 out of 2. 8 out of 9 becomes 9 out of 8. 11 out of 3 becomes 3 out of 11. 20 out of 7 becomes 7 out of 20. Now remember we said for our single integer as a fraction, that would be 3 out of 1. So upside down we get 1 out of 3. And for f then we've got 1 out of 10. So if we find the reciprocal, we get 10 out of 1. Anywhere they're divided by 1, 10 divided by 1 is simply 10. So these are our sort of special two, where we start with an integer, we get a fraction, where we start with a unit fraction. Remember, unit fraction is 1 out of something. Then we get an integer at the end. Mark those, make sure you're happy with them before you move on. Okay, so now we're going to have a look then at dividing two fractions. So there are 3 steps we go through. The first one is we keep the first fraction, we change the times symbol, sorry about that typing error there. We change the divide to a times, not the other way around, and we flip the second fraction to give us the reciprocal, and then we multiply. So those are the 4 steps we go through if we want to divide fractions. So we don't really ever divide fractions. We change them to multiplications to make it easier for us. So let's see how that works in practice. So here are our fractions then. We've got 4 out of 7 divided by 2 out of 3. So following our rule, we're going to keep the first one. So 4 out of 7. We're going to change the symbol in the middle. So we're going to change from divide to times. Now remember, divide and times are inverses. They are opposites of each other. So because we've changed that symbol from a divide to a times and done its opposite, then we need to change the fraction after it to its opposite as well. So the inverse of our fraction, our reciprocal of 2 out of 3 is 3 out of 2. So we keep the first one, we've changed the symbol, and we've flipped the second fraction. Okay, now we're back to a normal multiplication, so we can multiply as normal. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. So 4 times 3 is 12, 7 times 2 is 14, and we can simplify our fraction. So dividing both of these by 2 gives us 6 out of 7. Our next one then, so we've got 4 divided by 3 out of 5. So we're going to follow the same rule. Now remember, when we have an integer, we really prefer it when we're dealing with 2 fractions. So we're going to first of all change this 4 into a fraction. So that's now 4 out of 1 divided by 3 out of 5. So we've rewritten the question so that we have 2 fractions. Now we're going to follow our rules. We're going to keep the first one, 4 out of 1. We're going to change the symbol from divide to times, and we're going to flip the second fraction, so we get 5 out of 3. Now we multiply. So 4 times 5 is 20, 1 times 3 is 3. We've got an improper fraction, so we're going to see how many 3's we can fit into 20. So that's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 is the nearest we can get, so that's 6 whole ones. 2 remaining to get us from 18 to 20, back over our denominator of 3. So we get 6 2/3. Finally then, well, what happens if we have the fraction divided by the integer? Well, we're going to still follow the same rules. First thing, we want 2 fractions, so we're going to rewrite it so that our integer of 3 is a fraction. So we've now got our 6 out of 7 divided by our 3 out of 1. So all we've done in this first step is change our integer to a fraction. Now we're going to change our calculation to a multiplication. So we're going to keep the first one. We're going to change our symbol, and we're going to flip the second one. Now we multiply. 6 times 1 is 6, 7 times 3 is 21. So I've got a normal fraction. Let's see if we can simplify. Now they're not both even, so I know they can't be divided by 2. Can they be divided by 3? Yes, they can. So we're going to divide them by 3, and we get 2 out of 7. If you need to, pause the video, make a note of those different examples. Make sure you have got these 4 steps written really clearly in your books. Remember, we keep the first one, change the divide to a times, flip the second one so we get the reciprocal, and then we multiply instead. Okay, so some there for you to have a go at then. So again, we've got 4 here where they're both fractions, and we've got 4 with a mixture of integers and fractions. So make sure you use your notes to help you work through those. Pause the video, have a go now. All right, so for our first one then, so we're keeping the 3 out of 4, change the symbol, flip the fraction. Now we can multiply. 3 times 9 is 27, 4 times 1 is 4. 4 goes into 27 6 whole times with 3 remaining back over our 4, so 6 3/4. For number 2, we're keeping the 7 out of 8, change the symbol 2 times and flip the second fraction. 7 times 5 is 35, 8 times 4 is 32. 32 fits into 35 1 whole time with 3 remainder back over the denominator of 32. Our next one then, we'll keep the third, change the symbol, and we'll flip the 3 out of 6 to become 6 out of 3. Then we multiply. 1 times 6 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9. Now, it's a normal fraction, but we can simplify it. We can divide them both by 3 to give us 2 out of 3, 2/3. And finally for these ones then, we're going to keep the 5 out of 7, change the symbol, flip the second fraction, then multiply. 5 times 2 is 10, 1 times 7 is 7. 7 fits into 10 1 whole time with 3 remainder that goes back over the 7. So that's all our fractions with fractions. For our next one then, first step, remember we're going to change our 5 into a fraction, so it'll be 5 over 1, and we're going to keep that first fraction. So we get 5 over 1, change the symbol, flip the second fraction. 5 times 5 is 25, 1 times 4 is 4. 4 fits into 25 6 whole times with 1 remainder back over the denominator of 4, so 6 1/4. The same with the next one then, so we're going to put our 7 over 1 first before we do anything else. So 7 over 1, change the symbol, flip the fraction, we get 21 over 2. 2 fits into 21 10 whole times with 1 remainder back over the 2, 10 1/2. Same for the next one, so 8 over 1 times by our flipped fraction of 2 over 1. 8 times 2 is 16. And 1 times 1 is 1. 1 fits into 16, 16 whole times with no remainders, so just 16. Finally, the last one then, so we're going to start with our 6 over 1 times our fraction that's been flipped, so 4 over 3. 6 4s are 24, 1 times 3 is 3, and 3 fits into 24 8 whole times with no remainders. Check through your working, make sure you've marked every stage. If you have made any mistakes, just circle those and see if you can correct them. Okay, finally for today then, we're going to have a look at how we're using fractions to solve some problems. So, 4 explorers are on an Arctic expedition and are carrying food rations. They've already eaten 2 out of 5, 2/5 of their starting rations, and they have 10 more days to go on the expedition. What proportion of the original rations can they each eat every day to ensure the rations last until the end of the expedition? Okay, now with the problem solving here, you can pause the video if you want to, give it a try on your own, or you can wait and work through it with me. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. So they've eaten 2/5 of their starting rations. So if they had their entire rations, we would say is 1, and we've got to take away 2/5 from that. We would be left with 3/5. So they've only got 3/5 of their original food left, and that's now got to last them 10 more days. So 3/5 of the rations left to split across the 10 days. So that means we've got 3/5, and we're going to divide that into 10 equal parts to see how much they will have for each day. So following our rules then, first of all, we'll turn the 10 into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath. We're going to keep, then swap, then flip. So there's our original one. We put a 1 under our 10. We're going to keep our first fraction, swap the symbol, flip our second one, and multiply. So 3 times 1 is 3, and 5 times 10 is 50. So 3/50ths of their rations. So they can eat 3/50ths between 4 of them each day. Now we want to know how much each person gets. So that's enough for 4 people for 1 day. So we need to divide that now by 4 to see how much each person gets. So 3/50ths divided by 4. Again, let's turn our integer into a fraction first of all. Then we can keep, swap and flip. So keep the 3/50ths, swap the symbol, flip our 4/1 to 1/4, and now we can multiply. 3 times 1 is 3, and 50 times 4 is 200. So they can eat 3/200ths each per day. So what does that mean to us? Well, that means they need to share their rations into 200 equal pieces, and each person takes 3 of those to eat each day. Perhaps not very much food to last this expedition. Okay, thank you for working on dividing fractions with me today. Next lesson, we'll be looking a bit more in depth at those mixed numbers.